I have the pleasure to introduce the speaker of the next session. The session is session 2, plenary session 2, and it is titled Gender Inequality in Primary Healthcare Service Provision, the Bane of Universal Health Coverage. And to take this session is Dr. Ihanacho Peace from the University of Nigeria, Enugu campus. She's a registered nurse and a registered midwife. She has a Bachelor of Science degree and also a Master of Science, also a holder of a PhD in nursing. And our special area of interest is mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, can we put our hands together as we welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Peace Ihanacho. Welcome, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Can we? That is what we want to. By health, universal health coverage, we want to prevent and all that and all that. And then of course, every other person, I observe every other protocol. Students, I welcome you. Members of staff, every lady and gentleman here, good afternoon. My task is to discuss gender equality in PHC provision as the bane of universal health coverage. America is no longer there, but the truth is that it is etched in almost every culture, one way or the other. The differences, the differentials between the males and the females. And when we begin to talk about gender inequality, we are actually saying that women most of the time are at the bottom of the gender class hierarchy. And these inequalities usually place them at the receiving and disadvantaged end of the bargain. I believe that people who are here will agree with me. Usually, in most of the cultures, all these gender-based constraints are fostered by ethno-cultural persuasions, sentiments. Some places is religion, some places is culture. But I hope you know that we eventually are all products of cultures that we come from or that we are exposed to, whether as healthcare users or as healthcare providers. And this has implication for healthcare access and utilization for women, because we are talking about women being at the receiving end and the very disadvantaged end of the bargain. So for them, it has implication for access. Is international. Is there in Asia, is in Nigeria, is in Middle East, and all that. So women's movement is restricted. Again, there is always also, some prohibition in male-female interaction. And what does that do to the woman? If probably she has health needs, she's not permitted to move out or to take certain decisions by herself because of this. So when we are talking about these gender-based constraints, we better just know what we are talking about from the outset. So the person that is disadvantaged in this situation may not be able to take decision to care. And then I began to say that even for the provider, for example, I came across a study in Pakistan where, because of these two constraints of mobility and male-female interaction, policymakers will always come up with a way to shore up the problem. Like they might say, okay, let's have a special class of women who will go and give care to these women maybe in their homes. But the experience may actually be difficult, and the experience will not always be enjoyable for the workers themselves because of gender discrimination. You know, they are products of the same culture. Next, ultimately, the problem is not solved. We are still left with inequality. I'm coming to primary health care. We know that primary health care came into existence in 1978 following the Alma Ata Declaration that member nations signed into the agreement, and the first slogan was health for all by the year 2000. I don't know, some people may not have been born then, but I remember we were just imagining how it could be. By that time everybody will be having health. The PHC approach was concerned with the poor health status of a large population as well as the indignity of health, and healthcare being enjoyed by some but denied to others. What do we mean by indignity? The way it is provided. Remember that gender as a socially constructed norms, behaviors, activities, relationships, and attributes that a given society considers appropriate for men and women. Why is it necessary for us to say this? You know, while biologically we may not have so many differences, you know, inside me, the same thing I have is the same thing that a woman in America has, all things being equal, even though there are some other moderations that gender offers. But we want to emphasize here that gender is different across contexts. You know, in the specifics of what is considered appropriate for the woman. That's why we began to talk about places where women's mobility can be restricted, or places where a woman may not even allowed to work or hold some gainful employment. You know, she's supposed to serve as a slave, and we know what that one will do to her economic capacity and all that and all that. So the issues at stake, I want you to know when we talk about gender inequality, it's not just that people are differences between men and women give rise to discrimination and inequalities. So by the time we have said this, we have tried to say what we mean by gender inequality. That the way for boys, you know, so right to birth is denied by sex selective elimination, right to survival is denied by the neglect of the girl child. We have heard of girl children being deprived of immunization and all that, and probably the better food in the house, and of course the educational bits is also common. The mortality and morbidity indicators are unfavorable to the females. Maternal mortality in developing countries is unacceptably high. There is failure of achievement of Millennium Development Goals, Goal 3 for example, in relation to maternal mortality. And then gender equality and the empowerment of women, that is enshrined in that that's number 3. It's talking about gender equality and empowerment for women. It has not yet happened, especially in developing nations. Crime against women is increasing. Violence in domestic or at work places are occurring, and in public places too. Social factors like male dominance, subordinate status of women make them vulnerable to unfair treatment, discrimination, denial of basic human rights to survival, education, health, and inheritance. So these are the dynamics of but when you talk about gender inequality, you are now saying excluding people of this gender. Every other person can have this, but these people can have this limitation or the other limitation. Can you see how that is already affecting the principle on which, some of the principles on which even universal health coverage and primary health care are built. Are we together? Are we together? Because when somebody says universal health coverage is for everybody, we want to cover everybody, or at least 90%. And you now come and say, because of inequality, this group of people should be serialized, systematically eliminated. You see, it's already fighting one against the other. And that's why gender inequality has become a bane for universal health coverage, and in fact for primary health care for that matter. So remember that the ultimate goal of primary health care also includes reducing exclusion and social disparities in health. That is what universal coverage reforms are bringing in. It also includes organizing health services around people's needs and expectations. This is called service delivery reforms. That's under primary health care. And then integrating health into all sectors. So what is the current state of affairs? Since PHC came into existence, there have been reasonable achievements. For example, especially like in Nigeria, you can talk about a lot of gains in the area of immunization. Is it true? Is it? And then a lot of gains, maybe antenatal, at least up to 50% of women utilize or 60% utilize antenatal services, whether they have skilled delivery service or not. We have up to 60% in Nigeria, and across the world. We are saying that primary health care has actually done something, but there is substantial evidence pointing to growing inequalities again in health status and in access to health care between and within countries. Why is this? In industries, plus the problem of HIV/AIDS all came again to place a lot of emphasis on curative care. And somebody has already talked about how up to 90% of the funds go to the federal, while the glorious primary health care was now dumped, especially in places like Nigeria. So what was the World Health Organization's response to the derailment? Because we are